What's on your 2025 bingo card? Mine is pretty packed, and today I'm going to go through what's on it and why I think it could happen. My card has 5 columns: major crisis, foreign affairs, economic events, Trump's failed promises, and finally, a random category. Let's start off with the major crisis column. An alien invasion is likely to occur this year, especially if you listen to experts on paranormal activity. The most accurate one on this topic is John D'Souza, a former FBI agent who worked on paranormal investigations. He first predicted the term UFO would be changed to UAP, and that when that happens, to be on high alert. He takes the angle that the drone sightings we've been seeing are from the government, and they're using it to scare and provoke us. And he thinks we could see some form of a staged alien invasion, even as soon as this month, possibly something happening during the inauguration.
I would probably skip the inauguration at Washington, D.C. of Donald Trump, even if the tickets are free. I got a lot of people telling me, hey, the tickets are free. We're going to... No, don't go.
I know. I've been invited as well. I'm like, well, yeah, it's kind of terrifying. I mean, I'd love to be there. I'd love to see it, but
no, don't do it.
Yeah.
And
don't give in to.
Yeah, and number 4, of course, don't listen to anything the U.S. government tells you when they start telling you shelter in place. We have lockdowns now. Wear that astronaut suit. It's for your own good instead of just a mask. Just don't listen to anything the government says right now. And we have to keep listening to Donald Trump to see what he says. He's being very, very limited on this. I honestly don't think Donald Trump is going to the inauguration either. I think he's going to have an alternate site set up and ready, and he's going to do whatever he has to do there instead. Because I don't think they're going to be able to save Washington, D.C. at this point. I just don't think so.
Next up is a disease outbreak. There's a lot of options for which virus or disease could be the lucky winner. The powers that be seem hell-bent on running us through another pandemic. Recently, Dr. Hotez started saying we'd have a viral outbreak around January 20th.
Here's the reason why we need to care about this stuff, Nicole, is that we have some big picture stuff coming down the pike starting on January 21st. Mr. Bloomberg mentioned H5N1. That I'm really worried about. It's all over wild birds on the western part of the United States and going up in the north. It's getting into the poultry. We're seeing sporadic human cases, no human-to-human transmission yet, but that could happen. It's in the cattle. It's in the milk. And that's just the beginning. We have another major coronavirus likely brewing in Asia. We've had SARS in 2002, SARS-2, COVID-19 in 2019. And we know these viruses are jumping from bats to people thousands of times a year. But there's still more. We know that we have a big problem with mosquito-transmitted viruses all along the Gulf Coast, where I am here in Texas. So we're expecting dengue and possibly Zika virus coming back, or a Puche virus, maybe even yellow fever. And there's more.
And let's not forget that the bird flu is being ginned up by the media. If 2020 is their playbook, then bird flu is the perfect fear porn to fit the bill this time around.
This is another round of bird flu fear porn. We've had one case in Canada, one case in California now, as I recall. You may recall, I'm sure you do, Natalie, you have a mind like a steel trap, that we have already been through 2 rounds of this kind of intermittent pop-up cases that lead to a big nothing burger. These people aren't being hospitalized, and there's no evidence of efficient human-to-human transmission. Right now, we're still in a situation that's akin to where it was 6 or 9 months ago. There's no real evidence that that's the situational awareness problem has changed at all. I'm quite confident that Bobby and company are fully aware of where things stand with bird flu. And Peter is just, spreading more psychological bioterrorism is the phrase I use for this. But Natalie, what you missed in the lead-in that's breaking news is that the House has released its comprehensive report on the corona crisis. And one of the things that's a particular hot button for you and the War Room audience posse is that the House concludes that the World Health Organization withheld information about the pandemic. They conclude unequivocally that it was a single point of origin at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and that the World Health Organization withheld information about the origin of the virus from the world in order to protect the CCP. I assert, Natalie, that Tedros now must resign. I think that we now have the smoking gun in the form of this definitive House report, which, by the way, endorses Operation Warp Speed, but also concludes the vaccines were a failure, the various lockdown policies were a failure, the quarantine was a failure, et cetera, et cetera. I strongly recommend that people review this report and don't get caught up in the bloody fear porn that's circulating yet again. This is another attempt to spook Trump and his team, just like they were spooked with the corona crisis. And there is no reason to overreact to this. Saner minds need to prevail, and Peter Hotez needs to be put back in his box, in my opinion.
The World Economic Forum has been running a cyber attack simulation for several years now called Cyber Polygon. The most recent one was held in September. This year's scenario was titled Intelligent Assault, a Game of Destruction. The teams investigated a sophisticated targeted cyber attack using classical digital forensics and threat hunting techniques. The impact of a cyber attack would be far-reaching and be devastating to our modern society. The World Economic Forum makes no mystery out of what they think an attack would look like. Take a listen to this video from the World Economic Forum 4 years ago, titled A Cyber Attack with COVID-like Characteristics.
A cyber attack with COVID-like characteristics would spread faster and further than any biological virus. Its reproductive rate would be around 10 times greater than what we've experienced with the coronavirus. To give you an idea, one of the fastest worms in history, the 2003 Slammer sapphire worm, doubled in size approximately every 8.5 seconds, infecting over 75,000 devices in 10 minutes and almost 11 million devices in 24 hours. Fortunately, at least until now, cyber attacks have not impacted our health the way pandemics have, but the economic damages, and therefore the impact they have had on our daily lives, have been equal and sometimes even greater. You see, the only way to stop the exponential propagation of a COVID-like cyber threat is to fully disconnect the millions of vulnerable devices from one another and from the internet. All of this in a matter of days. A single day without the internet would cost our economies more than $50 billion, and that's before considering the economic and societal damages should these devices be linked to essential services, such as transport or healthcare.
Aliens are making their second debut on my 2025 bingo card. A plane getting shot down would play very nicely into a staged alien invasion. That same FBI agent I mentioned before, John D'Souza, has said the U.S. might stage a plane getting shot down in order to blame it on UAPs or aliens. Thus, we could gin up a whole intergalactic war. Take a listen.
To make people fear these UAPs, ultimately towards, and I'll tell you the next step, it's a little difficult to hear, but the next step, because they need to keep building up the fear of these UAPs, next step is really for the UAPs to start shooting down our commercial airliners and our military jets from the skies. And that, I believe, is going to be happening very, very soon.
The final item in the major crisis category is an electromagnetic pulse attack. This could happen naturally from solar weather or artificially via a targeted attack by an enemy. In that scenario, a nuclear weapon is launched hundreds of miles into space. Its explosion will cause all electronic devices to fry, rendering them completely useless. But that large scale of attack isn't necessary to make an EMP happen. This power has already been harnessed into targeted weaponry. A decade ago, the U.S. Air Force finally confirmed they have an EMP weapon that can be used to destroy electronic systems in a specific building.
Every target we wanted to, we prosecuted everyone. We made science fiction science fact.
We're not quite up to the place where the Star Trek and Star Wars movies are, but this is definitely an advancement in technology to be able to give us an opportunity to do things that we couldn't do before.
When that computer went out, when we fired, it actually took out the cameras as well. We took out everything on that. It was fantastic.
China has their own version, and Russia is developing a nuclear space weapon that could disable satellites. World War III is on its way sooner rather than later, especially given the precarious position we've put ourselves into regarding global food production and the recent pandemic. Take a listen to war correspondent Michael Yon.
And there's too much inertia in the system, right? And so that flash to bang is very slow. So we're talking about this very slow famine that we're going into. And remember, pandemic and famine and war, they go together. Triangle of death. If you get one, you get the other two every time. Pandemic, famine, war, pan for war. If you get a big famine, you're always going to get pandemic and war, with no exception. They go together. It's like a system. It's like heat goes with fire, right? And so if you get a big war, you'll get the other two. If you get a big pandemic, you get the other two. And all of these create human osmotic pressure, right?
This one is a bit obvious. If Trump cuts off funding to Ukraine like MAGA wants, then how can Ukraine continue with the war? They've already received $175 billion. When Zelensky can no longer suckle at the power and money teat that is the United States, how long can they survive against Putin?
This will be one of the last aid packages to Ukraine authorized under President Joe Biden, and it is worth billions of dollars. On the security side, he announced about $2.5 billion worth of assistance, sort of two prongs to that. One of them is a $1.25 billion drawdown on the U.S. military's own existing supplies that will be sent directly to the Ukrainian military. This is something that the U.S. has done dozens of times since the conflict began. And then $1.2 billion authorized through what's called the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. Now, Biden says these two moves will provide an immediate influx of military capabilities for Ukraine, as well as longer-term support as well. Specifically, this is going to mean more ammunition, more missiles, more clothing and personal equipment for Ukrainian soldiers.
Chinese President Xi Jinping recently declared the need to, quote, comprehensively strengthen training and preparation for war. This is likely because China is getting ready to invade Taiwan, with one top U.S. admiral testifying that Xi Jinping is planning to invade by the year 2027. Another document published by the Department of Defense, titled The Ambitious Dragon, states that China will invade Taiwan by the year 2030. The year may fluctuate, but the threat is pretty much guaranteed. China is beefing up its military big time. Their official defense budget increased by more than 15% over the last few years to more than $220 billion. Now, sure, a war anywhere in the world isn't great, but why would this be such a big deal to the U.S.? Well, we guaranteed them protection back in 1979 with the Taiwan Relations Act. It states that, quote, the United States shall provide Taiwan with arms of a defensive character and shall maintain the capacity of the United States to resist any resort to force or other forms of coercion that would jeopardize the security or social or economic system of the people of Taiwan. In short, if China goes to war with Taiwan, it's going to war with the United States. We are legally obligated to protect them. But this is more than just the U.S. looking out for the little guy. It also is in our best national interest. If we defeat a Chinese invasion, it protects the Indo-Pacific area, as well as our allies in Asia, Japan, Philippines, and Australia. Taiwan is vital to their defense. A Chinese takeover would threaten their security and allow China to spread its rapidly growing naval fleet all over the region. Similarly, if we let Taiwan fall, then those very allies and others around the world won't see us as reliable. It would damage our reputation, make us appear weak, and force us to prove ourselves worthy in other ways. And finally, it shows our allies that if we can protect Taiwan from a Chinese invasion, then we can do that for them as well. Now, Taiwan is a tiny island, but it serves as a proxy for our military strength. About the size of Maryland, Taiwan sits just 100 miles off the coast of China. And an invasion would be quite easy. One expert says that China could take over in under an hour.
You're still going to move amphibious assault ships across the strait. Each of them can deliver about 800 troops and, more importantly, dozens of troop transport helicopters as well as gunships to do an airborne assault. They can reach the two airports within 10 to 15 minutes. You're going to have these transport ships, mostly civilian vessels, and have been loaded with hundreds of thousands of troops, armored vehicles, tanks, logistics that you need to occupy an island of 23 million people. You're going to have bombers launched from the mainland. You're going to have the largest cruise missile and ballistic missile and rocket forces in the world, pummeling fixed radar installations, pummeling naval facilities, pummeling communication nodes. All of this can happen literally within the first 30 minutes of action in the first year of that war. Global depression right off the bat.
And that assumes it doesn't go nuclear.
That's right.
Now, don't go thinking our government is scared of this invasion from China because they love Taiwan so much or they have a duty to protect. You see, there's this little fact about Taiwan, and that is it's a technological supercenter of the world. Taiwan makes nearly 70% of all semiconductor chips in the world. They are used in everything from computers to medical devices to cell phones. Each year, nearly a third of the new computing power we rely on is fabricated in Taiwan. Let's go a little deeper. Just one company in Taiwan, TSMC, that one makes more than half of the global market for contract chip fabrication. That's a bigger dominance than OPEC has over oil, which is just 40%. As Time also noted in their article, quote, Taiwan produces almost all the most advanced processors, a market position that makes Saudi Arabia's 12% share of global oil production look unimpressive. We all know that Trump is bought and paid for when it comes to Israel. Billionaire donors Sheldon and Miriam Adelson gave $20 million to Trump in 2016, and they were incredibly influential in convincing him to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Then in 2020, they gave $90 million to Trump's campaign. In this last election cycle, Miriam Adelson gave $100 million to Trump, with that reportedly contingent on him officially annexing the West Bank. And it seems that Trump is already delivering on that promise with his appointment of Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel. When he was recently asked about annexing the West Bank and if it's a possibility, he said, well, of course. Well, it's something he's been a long-time fan of. If you go back to 2017, he was touting the same idea, that Israel is entitled to the land.
My feelings personally, and I'm speaking only as a person, I think Israel would only be acting on the property it already owns. I think Israel has title deed to Judea and Samaria. There are certain words I refuse to use. There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities. There's no such thing as an occupation. That they get out of their minds that people are living in lean-tos and tents, and sleeping in cars, circled around a tree. They're living in very well-designed and beautiful cities and communities. Can't wait to get back. I'm going to take an extra hat. I'm going to get it to President-elect Trump. Build Israel great again. Who knows? We may see him wear this out there in one of his rallies somewhere. I don't know. Can't promise that. I can only promise he will get a copy of the hat.
We know that Trump wants to finish the war quickly. We know that Congress is ready to back him.
I've seen the footage of
You've seen footage of
shredded children's bodies. And that's my taxpayer dollars. Going to bomb those kids.
So I think we should kill them all, if that makes you feel better. Everybody, Hamas and the Palestinians have been attacking Israel for 20 years, and it's time to pay the price.
And we know that even his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is ready to scoop up the land.
Maybe, but I'm not sure there's much left of Gaza at this point. I mean, Gaza's waterfront property. It could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done? And so I think that it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there. But I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. But I don't think that Israel has stated that they don't want the people to move back there afterwards.
The only thing Trump is waiting for is to be sworn in as president. A false flag terrorist attack is always on the table. As a millennial, after you lived through 9/11, you kind of expect to have another one come any day now. Now that you know where we've been, find out where we're going. Tune in to Ladies Love Politics, where you can stay informed without going insane.